what does the world need? Right? So how can you package your experience with what lights you up, what the world needs, and really be able to live that more fulfilling life? Because you can do it, right? There is a way to have it all, and having it all is fulfillment and financial security.
So, hey, welcome to the It's the Human Experience podcast. Today, I have Brooke Dukes on the episode with us today. We'll be talking all things going through self-actualization. Welcome, Brooke.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. I don't really skip a beat. I just jump into the episode. I don't like to go through all of the fluff, right? So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. The first question I wanted to ask you is if you could define yourself with just 3 to 5 words, what words would you use to describe Brooke?
I would say joyful.
Joyful.
I would say empowering and focused.
Nice. So joyful, empowering, and focused. And those things are so important, right? Especially when we talk about self-actualization, being able to stay focused and to try to find your happiness on that course while empowering yourself and others. So I love it.
That was way better than what I was thinking. So thank you.
Like I just connected dots real quick. Nice. What would you say in terms of like your daily routine around mindfulness and really setting the tone for the day? Like what kind of things do you do to do that?
The first thing before I even get out of bed is meditate. I meditate for 20 minutes every morning. It sets my day. I've been doing that. It's interesting. I tried for 20 years and I could not get the ritual of meditation. And I knew if you read any autobiographies, the most successful, happiest people in the world, they meditate. When they ask, what are the top things you do? And it was so difficult. And about 6 years ago, I started doing transcendental meditation and it really changed everything for me. I have not missed a day in 6 years. And it really helps me to focus on what's important because I'm able to tap into my unconscious and guide me and tell me the things that I need to know. So many times if I've had a problem in, the day before or weeks before, that's when they pop up. The answers just come to me. So that is one of the most important. I also read at that time right after I get up because I can't read at night because I can't shut my mind off. So if it's personal development or professional, I'll just think about ways to implement all night long. So I can't do that. So I have to do it in the morning. And then I exercise. So whether that's yoga or, cardio or strength or whatever the case, it just clears my head. So I get up very early to start my day because it helps to ground me.
What time is early? I hear out loud. We have so many different personal development books that talk about just how successful people really start their day like by 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. So what does
I get up about 5:30.
5:30.
So it's not crazy. I mean, it's still dark. So it's a little crazy. But I mean, there are times that I'm a morning person now. So I'm lucky enough to, that's kind of my clock, my internal clock. Past like 4 o'clock, 5, I'm like, okay, I can work, but I'm not going to be doing a podcast. That's for sure.
No, I love that. I definitely want to touch on the fact that there's some self-awareness there, right? You know, when you show up as your best self, you know how to get yourself in the daily routine to be able to work towards those goals. I loved how you were very transparent in your journey through meditation, because like you, even in my 9 to 5 and just different realms that I've experienced meditation, when I show up with meditation, they're like, picture yourself pulling it down in your spine. I'm like, I'm thinking right now, my body's not going, my mind won't let me pull it down to my spine. So I love your transparency around that. It can be hard, but it can happen.
Yeah. And that's the thing with meditation. The one thing, I think the biggest thing that helped me with transcendental is that the fact that most people that meditate or the teachers clear your mind. Well, no one can do that. That's impossible. And it's not even really what you want to do. You want to focus on something, whether it's a mantra or music or guided, and you want to just let the thoughts pass, not hold on to anything, let them pass and just observe. So be the observer, not the person that shuts down all of their thoughts, because that will just make you insane, which is what I did for 20 years. Could never do it. I would end up frustrated. So
Nice. I love that. Oh my goodness. I love that because I definitely could resonate with not being able to do it. So I love that you overcame that. And I'll have to look into that, try to figure out how to really meditate that way. Because for me, I write, I am willing to write poetry. I'm willing to draw all sorts of things to be able to just help me in that mindfulness and being still, because that's essentially what you're doing. Sometimes we ask for things and we're like, we want this, we want that, but we're not still enough to receive it. So it sounds to me like in your mindfulness moments, over time, you're able to receive it because you're still enough to be able to listen to what's going on.
absolutely. And it's funny because when you asked me 3 to 5 words, if you had asked me that even 5 years ago, maybe even sooner, probably people that know me would say sooner, and I would have said driven. And what I know is that was when I'm in uncertainty or I'm afraid, right? I'm fearing something, change or failure or embarrassment or all the things, right? I go into action because to your point, that helps me to feel certain. It would help me to not to distract myself from the fear or the pain or whatever it was. So when I started to meditate, that helped me, to your point, to slow down because that's where all the answers are. Because if you're making decisions or getting to action, even doing things creative and you're not in state, it's not coming from your best place. A lot of times it's coming from a pattern and it's coming maybe from your worst place, which would happen. So yeah, it's really helped to shift that for me so that I can become more guided and really be aware of what's happening with me, with my circumstances, and just observe.
I love that. It's funny, in episode 6 of the It's a Human Experience podcast, I talk about like faith and the subconscious mind, the conscious mind. And it sounds like what you're talking about is your ability to get to your subconscious mind and to really push out a lot of the things. And what you said resonated on the level to where, for me, I'm an action taker as well. And for me, I had to learn in terms of self-regulation, self-reflection, and all the things that I take action because I feel in control.
Yes.
But if we say that we believe in faith and we say that we're being guided, why are we trying to be in control? Why aren't we still enough to take the time to figure out how to get to where we're trying to be? So I love that you touched on that also, because it's so true. We get busy because it feels like we're doing so much. But are we doing so much of the things we're supposed to do? Or are we just doing any and everything to stay busy? And so I love that you touched on that.
Well, you're right, because there's also something in America that busy people are important people. It doesn't matter what you're doing, to your point. It could be something productive or not productive. But the busier you look, the more important people think you are. So it makes this vicious cycle for us, right? And when I gave the word focused, that's what I have a vision, whether it's personal, professional, whatever that is. And that's what I stay focused on. I don't focus on the path, which is what I used to do, right? Because if I knew the path, I'd already have what I wanted. I don't know what it is. So I need to put the vision out and just have faith that things are going to be brought into my world so that I can learn to become a person that can achieve that vision. To your point, if I'm controlling it, well, then I'm just using all the resources I have right now. I'm never going to get there. Or I'd already be there if I had the resources, right?
Absolutely. I love it. Oh my God, you just dropped so many gems and touched on so many things during that period, Because what happens is we see that bigger vision. So we've meditated, we understand like the bigger vision, the bigger picture. And we're like, how are we supposed to do it? So then we start trying to figure out how to do it. But the reality is it's one step at a time. It's slow and steady finishes the race. And so you don't need to know how to do the whole thing. To your point, you have to perfect personal development for the next step. So you're working on getting that next step done and doing all the things within that next step to get you to where you need to be, not trying to iron out the entire. And so I love that because it takes time to realize that. And I feel like a lot of people get stuck there. They get paralyzed and they get numb because they're like, wait, I heard this. I know I'm supposed to do this. And then one or two things happen. They either quickly try to act it out and then feel like it's too tall of a glass to fill, or they feel like, you know what, I can't do it. So I'm just not going to do it. And that's hard.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. You're so right. Because people just look at, okay, I want this thing that's far off in the distance. And they're focusing on that. When to your point, there might be a million little steps to get there. And so, of course, it's overwhelming. Of course, you're paralyzed and have no idea what to do. But if you just stay focused on the next step and then the next step, right? And allow yourself to be guided on what those steps are and have faith that it's going to get you in the direction that you want. But it sounds so easy, but it's very difficult. It's difficult to let go of control. Because we want it so bad, and I know I can get there, but do you? Like, let's start the becoming process, and then yes, you will get there. But that takes longer. It takes more work. It's harder. Right? So everyone wants that quick fix, right?
Gratification.
Take that pill. Oh, absolutely.
Oh my goodness, yeah, you touched on so much there. I love it. Do you have a favorite quote? I know for me, going through all of the motions, I always try to have a quote, whether it's on a folder, it's somewhere. I've even worked in organizations where I stick it on doors to motivate other people. So do you have a quote that's kind of got you through the years?
I do. And it's interesting because I love quotes as well. In fact, I'm writing a book and at the beginning of every chapter is a quote. And the one that resonates with me right now, especially given the conversation that we just had, is Martin Luther King had the faith, right? Faith is taking the next step when you can't see the staircase. I'm paraphrasing it, and it was longer than that. But I love that because it's so true. And it really aligns with exactly what we're talking about today. Absolutely. Right? Just take the step. You don't need to know everything. In fact, it's better if you don't, because you won't sabotage it then.
You won't try to come up with a plan, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I guess one that I could think of that's very similar is from Nelson Mandela, where it always seems impossible until it's done. For me, I had to look at that over and over and over along the way. Every time I start up a new goal and a new task. And I think it's important to touch on that too, because for me, I think as I accomplished goals through the years, I just felt like I was a goal accomplisher. Yep, I'm good to go. And it took me years to realize that, honey, just because you mastered these sets of goals doesn't mean you don't go back to the end of the line for your new goal. You need to learn new things and grow. And so I love that.
Yeah. And you're so smart, because that is an important part of reaching your vision is, yes, you have to have a vision, and it needs to be a measurable target. It can't just be world peace. Well, how are you going to measure that? And how do you know if you're going to get there? Right. So it needs to be whatever you can measure. If we take it from a professional perspective, a CEO of a company, I want to be a $500 million business by 2028. That's a vision.
Right.
But the piece that a lot of times people miss is you need to have your purpose behind it. Because to your point, those quotes kept you going. You have to have some leverage to keep you going, because it's going to be tough, because you have to change. Right. And that's one of the hardest things for us to do is change. And it's one of the most essential things that we do. Right. What is that? If you're not growing, you're dying. Well, growing is changing. So you need to make sure you have leverage every step of the way, not just leverage of things that you want, the moving towards pleasure. When I get this vision, I'll be able to put my kids through school and buy a new house. And no, also you want if I don't make this vision, what am I going to lose?
Mm-hmm.
That's leverage too, because people are they either are motivated from moving towards pleasure or moving away from pain.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have both of those, depending upon where you're at and what point in your life and how long that vision takes you, you can have leverage on both things, whichever way you're feeling most motivated at that time.
I love that. And a lot of people don't think about the latter of what you said in terms of what happens if I don't do this. And it's so important to ask yourself that, because it's kind of like reverse psychology on yourself. So where you're telling yourself, hey, if I don't do this, my life is going to continue to look like this. Am I okay with that? If I'm not okay with that, then I need to put in the action towards the goals that we planned to be able to accomplish that goal. Otherwise, we might as well do nothing, because if we're not going to actually take those steps, then it's nice to talk about what you're going to do, but you have to work on what it is you need to do to get there. So I love that reverse psychology piece. I always do that to myself, to where I end up having to kick myself in the butt to get things done. And you have to do that. You know, we're the only thing stopping us from getting things done.
Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. So I'm going to move into defining moments. What are some hardships, challenges, or obstacles that you face, however you want to share it, whether it's early childhood, early adulthood, recently, or we'll say recently for later, that has really shaped you into who you are?
I would say the one that always sticks out to me, I was 34 years old. So, just yesterday. And I was in corporate America. I was an executive in a Fortune 100 firm. And I was working a deal, and it was a $500 million deal. And the client prospect wanted us to go to Nova Scotia to meet with the CEO. It was actually United Airlines, to meet with the CEO and some of their other leaders before they signed the contract. Well, I had a team of 25 people that were working with me on this because I was 8 months pregnant. And so my boss at the time had said, you go or you lose the commission, which was a 6-figure commission. And so I boarded the plane, a private jet, and I went to preterm labor on the way back. My daughter is fine.
Good.
And what I recognized is I was not living my values. I essentially risked my child's life for money. I knew better. I knew it wasn't who I was. And it really made me look at what I had been doing, right? I'd had an older child. He was 4 years old. This was my second child. And I just thought about, really my work had consumed me. My drive for success had consumed me. Because I was of the mindset that when I get here, when I get this success, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be able to do this. Then. And not recognizing that happiness is what creates the success, right? It's not the other way around. Success does not create happiness. And I really just had to reevaluate my life. And I ended up leaving corporate America and starting my own business. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneur life. And, 21 years ago now. And it was a beautiful lesson for me, and it ended up being a beautiful lesson for my children as well, because they got a different version of me, a much better role model than who I was going to be for them.
Nice. I love that. It's like realizing, wait, hold on. I was going towards societal expectations of success, but I'm looking at Brooke in the mirror, and Brooke is not happy in the way that she thought she would be. And Brooke now has children, that these children are looking up to me. So how can I show up as my best self so that when they see me, I'm proud of the person that they see. So I know I'm being that good example. So I love that. I love it, love it, love it. Awesome. Like I have chills, so I'm trying to feel great from it. I am all about like going into your purpose and really moving towards that direction. And I think a lot of what you talked about in terms of the adversity and just the triumphs through your journey really touches on how important it is to use your experience and leverage it to figure out what your purpose is. So many people say, like recently I met an 18-year-old that spoke to me and she was asking, how did you know? And I said, life will teach you. And I don't think we spend a lot of time teaching people that life teaches you. The lessons and the wins are what's going to make you have the story to relate to whatever it is you're going to do. We put these expectations on young children and we ask them, what do they want to be when they grow up? When the teacher that's asking them these questions doesn't even want to be there. So are you seriously asking kids to make adult decisions at such a young age? While I think it's good for them to start thinking about, from a brainstorming perspective, what career options might work and not work for them. But I feel like it creates this pressure for high school students specifically to where they feel like they are not meeting societal expectations because they don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And it's as though we think it's something fixed. I think that it's evolved. We can change who we want to be every 5 years if that feels right to us based on our experiences. So I love that you shared that piece.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, awesome. So what about like your early adulthood? Was there anything in your childhood or early adulthood that helped to kind of shape you kind of even going to that corporate America feel? Like what in your childhood or early adulthood made you kind of move into that direction?
Well, I was an abused child. So that really, and I was the first in my family to go to college. Had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I did not want to live the life that my parents lived. And so that was really a big, hence the driven and the not focusing on pain and getting into action. I mean, all of that stemmed from my childhood. And again, for me, I let all of that go years ago because, just to your point, it made me who I am. And I love my life. I've loved my journey. I love my children. I love my partner, all of it. You change one thing and everything changes.
Absolutely.
So, and I recognize that even though, my biological father, people would go, oh, he's not a good man. He did this and that. And what I recognize is he did the best he could. Was it good? No. But he was a very abused human as well, more so than anyone I'd ever known. It doesn't, but it helps me to understand. I'm empathetic, and I have forgiven him years ago. And forgiveness, that doesn't matter to him. I haven't spoken to him in 35 years, but it was me. It freed me.
Yeah.
So that really started my growth, because then when I decided to have children, because I used to never want to be married, didn't want to have children. I was just going to travel the world and be a career woman. And then I met my husband. All of that was thrown out the window. And then he really wanted children. So I had to reevaluate that. And I think I knew deep down it was what I needed for my own growth as well, because it's the most growth I've ever had in my entire life, having children. And that was what started. I went into therapy because I knew I had to heal. I knew that I had to be, to your point, a role model. It wasn't enough to just tell them what I needed to be the role model and the best person I could be for them. And so it went from therapy to psychology to human behavior to, and all of the other things that I've done for the past, however many years to support my growth and moving forward. So maybe more than you wanted to know.
Oh my God, Brooke, I'm over here like we're soul sisters. So many things you just said resonates from the standpoint of early on in my childhood with my mom and watching her be a single mother, to where that made me want to be driven because I didn't want to experience a lot of the hardship that she experienced, right? And she talked a lot about making sure that I'm independent, making sure that I have my own. So that really pushed me in understanding that, honey, you got to get a career.
Exactly.
You got to figure this out. And to that end, I felt like, just in terms of seeing my mom struggle and knowing that as a parent who has all these children, you can't focus on children in the way that you want to pour into them. And so like you, I just didn't want kids. I didn't for a husband. I wanted to be a career woman, free, traveling the world. I always say I'm a gypsy at soul. Like, I just want to be free, making impact and doing the thing across the world. And like you, I met my husband and he is big on kids. He wanted a football field of kids. And I'm like, not from me, honey. And so I end up having my daughter who will be 16 this year. And then I had twins who will be 11. And I said, we're shutting down the shop. No football fields. But I had to reevaluate things because, to your point, I realized that my happiness came from my relationships with my family, with my husband, with my kids. And separate from that, I had to look to myself to say, because I'm sure you experience this, people from the outside who know me will say things like, you didn't even want kids. And then you'll see people who has a desire for kids. And then you realize that it's a lot of the obedience that you do in your faith work that allows you to be able to get all of these blessings and all of these things, because you're kind of taking that time to be mindful and still in figuring out who you are as a person. And so with that, you get the things that you need to keep you strong that you don't even know that you'll need to keep you strong. So that was kind of like a pivotal aha moment for me, to where I was like, God knew that I needed all these things. That's why he gave me all these things. And to your point, like, that's where I feel the most grounded, the most happiest, because I'm making that impact, not only on other people, but on my family and my kids. So I just was like, are we soul sisters?
Well, and then, like, you brought up such a good point, because you speak to, and this happens a lot, you speak to the abuser, and you don't speak to your heroes that were there, which is my mother. I mean, without her support, no one believes in me like my mother.
Right.
The man she married, who is my father, right? He's been in my life since I was 7, showed me what it was like to be an amazing man. So I think it's important, because you're right, it's family.
Mm-hmm.
It always is. And I think that when I looked in the mirror after that jet experience, I recognized that my priorities were completely out of whack, right? Because my family was coming last.
Mm-hmm.
That's not at all. And I think it was Dale Carnegie. He gives an amazing example of it. They have a mason jar, and it's a way to prioritize. And he was in front of a class, and he had the mason jar filled with rocks. And he said, is this jar full? I said, well, yes. And so then he poured in some gravel. Like, is it full? Well, yes. Then he poured in some sand. Oh my gosh, full? Yeah, even more, right? Then some water. And the whole point of it is, if you think about the rocks as the most important thing is your family. If you start with your profession, which is the sand, and fill up that mason jar, there's no room then for the rocks.
Right.
For important things. And it's so true. And it's so many times with people that I work with, and myself, I experienced it, where you can justify so quickly why you put them on the back burner. There's so many different reasons why you're doing it for them. You're not doing it for them. You could be, that's what you think. You're doing it for so many other unworthiness, for, to cover up pain, for fear of failure, fear of success. I mean, all of those things are really what you're doing it for.
Yeah, it's such an ego stroke is really what it is.
Yeah, the ego's taken over.
Yeah, I had to come to that realization years ago, where I'm like, you know what? I get the most compliments when I'm working with people and I'm making a difference in their lives. When I show up to work, I'm hearing everybody say how awesome of a leader I am. And I had to reflect and look back at that, like, Hazel, that's not cool, honey. Why do you need that level of ego stroke? And to your point, at that point, you realize that some of that is for you, and it's not for everyone in the way that you say that it is. And so you have to figure out, like, how do I brush some of that off and make it less about me and more about impact? So I love that.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So I always like to start to close out with, if you had a superpower, what would that be? But before I ask that question, I want to ask, what is your superpower? Because we all have one.
I would say My superpower is my ability to be vulnerable. It's really saved my life. It has the shame and the unworthiness and all of the things I felt from my childhood. The only thing to overcome that is vulnerability, right? And it's what has built my self-esteem. It's what's kept me going, is really being proactively vulnerable and giving love no matter what. And I'm able to do that without fear of what I'm going to get back, whether it's good or bad. And it's really what I built my life on.
I love it. I love it. And I feel like a lot of people look at vulnerability as like a bad thing and you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You have to own your story. There are so many other little Brookes out there in the world that are waiting for you to share your story so they don't feel alone, so they don't feel like they can't do it. And I think there's so much power in owning your story, while some people have the shame around it where I don't want to talk about this and I don't want to talk about this. But those things happen to you for a reason. And I'm not saying share your business with every and anybody, but in the moments where it counts, you have to own it. Your story is why you're as sharp as you are. And so I love that. And
It's
so
power. Vulnerability is power. And that's the unfortunate thing is we as women, let's face it, we've got the cornerstone on that. We know how to be vulnerable like no one else, right? And yet we're taught vulnerability is weakness.
mm-hmm.
And if we really, and Brene Brown writes so many amazing books on vulnerability. I mean, I don't know that anyone, no need for anyone to write any more on it, right?
Yeah.
But I encourage people to read those books. It's important. It's important work to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, she definitely, I loved her books. And so if you could have any superpower, what would that be?
The thing that I work on the most, I don't know if it's a superpower, but what I have found from years of drive and activity is my intuition. So over the last, few years, I've really worked on listening to that. So I would want my superpower to be is to be able to tap into that intuition to support and guide me, right, when needed. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. That intuition, absolutely, in terms of just being one with your true self and knowing how to have that discernment is definitely powerful, because sometimes we talked about the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, faith, and all the things. And I think in one of my previous episodes, I talk about how sometimes it's hard to discern where the noise is coming from and which one you should follow. So having that superpower to where you're like, nope, that's it. That's exactly the way I'm going to go. That would be wonderful. Awesome. I love it. I wanted to leave with just some key takeaways that you wanted to share with the audience. Anything that we didn't cover that you want to share?
Well, I would say it's so important to really look at what lights you up. What are your gifts, right? Look at from there, look at your experience, your past experience. And what does the world need? Right? So how can you package your experience with what lights you up, what the world needs, and really be able to live that more fulfilling life? Because you can do it, right? There is a way to have it all, and having it all is fulfillment and financial security. You don't have to be a monk living on the top of a mountain, meditating 24 hours a day for the rest of your life to have that fulfillment. You can live in the world with pleasure, right? Material pleasure as well. And be able to and I feel like, especially for women, be kind to yourself, right? Really look at, you don't have to pretend. It's okay if you need help, ask for help. It's okay to voice, I'm struggling in this area, whether it's motherhood, career, being a spouse, whatever that looks like. I feel like that will make the world would be such a better place if people were just honest with how they felt, with what their experience was in that moment. Because when I had that epiphany, 20 years ago, I didn't have anyone to turn to because the people that were in my life were busy being perfect. I was looking around like, well, no one's struggling like this, like I am. And I didn't know. Right. So I'm rambling a little bit, but I feel like to wrap it all up is really be understand your gifts. What I always look at is find your purpose and share it with the world.
Absolutely. And those sentiments sit with me so well in terms of find your gifts, share it with the world. They're meant to be shared with the world. They're not for you to hold on to.